Hi, everyone. You're probably watching the replay. If you're seeing this, we have some viewers. We have 2 viewers. Hi, everyone. Let me know where you're tuning in from. My name is Veronica, and we will get started in just a couple minutes, just to let people get settled in. We can get started. It is Wednesday. It is noon over here in California. And we're going to talk about letters of recommendation today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so all about letters of rec when applying to graduate school, of course. So, as I had mentioned, my name is Veronica, and I'm an admissions expert at Magoosh. I'm also a PhD student at the University of California at Santa Barbara. Hi, Deva. Thanks for joining. I'm in my 4th year of my PhD, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. But let's get into letters of rec. So, what are letters of recommendation? So letters of rec are an important component of graduate applications. They allow your previous professors to speak on your behalf, and it also allows for them to comment or validate any of the content that you included in your personal statement or statement of purpose. So if you were discussing research that you had done, courses that you took that prepared you for graduate school, that professor has the capacity to, or the opportunity, to comment on that and to provide further information. So that's really valuable to create a cohesive graduate application. So you usually need 2 to 5 per application. Usually 3 is kind of like the sweet spot, but anywhere I think they will accept 2 mostly, but usually just more than 1, and usually 5 is kind of max. So that would mean you'd need about 2 to 3, maybe 4 professors that you can think of to ask to write you a letter with enough anticipation for them to do so. So this is kind of right around that time for a lot of you. A lot of you will be submitting applications December, like end of December, maybe even early January. So it's still a good time to ask for those letters of rec. And we're going to talk about how to do that. Okay, so how do you get strong letters? Because that's the point. It's not so much about getting, as many letters as you can, as much as it's about getting strong ones and good ones that can represent you in the way that you want to be represented when you're applying. So you are responsible for all of the logistics of the submission. Oh, by the way, for anyone who's watching live, if you have any questions related to graduate school applications, feel free to drop them in the chat. They don't need to be related to letters of rec at all. We always do a Q&A after the presentation or after the webinar. So we can talk about anything. It doesn't have to be letters of rec related in any way. Okay, so you are responsible for all of the logistics of submission. So that means you're responsible for seeking out the letter writer, for consulting about their interest and ability to write for you. And then, you will be responsible for following up via email and providing those resources that they might need to be able to write for you. And we'll talk about that in a second. You're also responsible for that friendly follow-up, probably the week of submission. Just to remind folks, professors are very busy. They might have already written the letter, but just needed that reminder to submit and like where to submit and just make it easy for them. So that's all on your plate as a student, as an applicant. And basically the way that you follow through with this sequence, plus a few other steps, depending on where, how, when you're applying, is what's going to but what's going to make it possible for you to receive a strong letter. So there's kind of like an art to it, or like a strategy to it. And it is daunting. I will say that I'm like, I don't want to ask for the letters of rec. It's just like, I don't know what it is about it. But once you do it, and you've just, you're going to do it once you're in graduate school too, for other opportunities, most likely, like fellowships and things like that. So once you start doing it, you realize it's not that big a deal. You realize that all professors write letters. That's a huge part of being a professor. And that a lot of professors, you'd be surprised, are willing to support you and want to see you in graduate school, because it's just, they went to graduate school. So okay, so tips for seeking these letters. So reaching out never hurts. I put a little asterisk next to never because, I mean, technically depends on how you ask. But usually reaching out, gauging interest for a letter isn't going to hurt you in any way. The worst thing that somebody could say is, you know what? I don't think I can write you a strong letter. Okay, well, that's fine, right? And that's possible. Or someone could just say, I just don't have the capacity to right now. I'm already writing for, many students, and I won't be able to get it in on time, and I don't want to let you down. And, that's okay. Or someone could confirm that they will write you a letter and then not submit, because deadlines, hard deadlines are sometimes hard to meet, and perhaps you won't get that letter. But I say that to say that asking isn't going to hurt you. So sorry, I need to sneeze. Please excuse me. Okay, so asking isn't going to hurt you. So sending a friendly and formal, excuse me, I meant to say email, to gauge interest is something that you should consider with just about every professor that could possibly write a strong letter for you. And to be honest, you probably have more potential letter writers than you think. And that's for most students that I work with. They're like, oh, I just don't think anyone can write a letter for me. And to be honest, you probably have more professors who remember you in their class, and think you're a stellar student and would be happy to write a letter, just supporting your path towards graduate school. So I always tell students that. I say that to myself. I'm like, there's more people than you think. And so sometimes you just kind of have to really think about your resources, your connections, the classes you took, the experiences you've had. I'd say for students who are coming out of undergrad, or even if you're coming out of graduate school, if you're applying, the first place to start is to think of all of the courses you've taken with a B+ letter grade or above. So ideally an A. Those are all potential letter writers. And as long as you did well in their course, and you did connect with them in some way, you spoke with them, you either introduced yourself or you went to office hours, they know who you are, then that's a potential letter writer for you. And there might be a lot more than you think. And even if it's been a few years since you've seen them, that doesn't mean that they can't possibly write for you. So let me get into that topic. So ideally, you would reach out to these professors that you think might be able to write for you, that you're considering, and give them the information that they need to remember you. So that would be the course that you took with them, which was the subject and the date. So that was 2017 spring semester, something like that. What you learned, or why that class is impactful to you, and why you're still interested in that subject in regards to graduate school now, and that just kind of demonstrates that the class has been impactful for you, and that's more of a reason for them to be able to write for you. So consider including that in the email. Of course, include whatever else you feel is necessary based on the relationship that you have had with that professor and the type of letter that you're requesting. And I recommend, while you're gauging interest, to still have your updated CV, your personal statement, your statement of purpose handy. So these are the resources that I was referring to, that are really useful for your letter writers. So even if they remember you and they want to write for you, it's always going to be helpful for them to have your CV or your personal statement, so that they can reference that while they're writing, so that they can actually include some of that information and some of those dates, right? Because we forget dates, we forget, all of those things, but they remember the general reason why they want to write for you. So I think the name of the game with letters of recommendation is to make it as easy as possible for your letter writer. So as you're gauging interest, already have your CV available in case they say, oh, I think I could write for you. Do you have any material for me? Send over that CV right away, or that personal statement right away. Excuse me, statement of purpose. So that they can review it and say, oh yeah, that's right. You're interested in medical anthropology, and you have been since you took my classes, and that's great. And so I am able to write for you, right? That's an example. So make sure you have that handy for them, and also have, once they confirm, so don't give them this information before they confirm, but once they confirm that they're able to write for you, also have all of the additional information. So that's like the logistics, like the link to submit, if that's the way that the application does it, the date, of course, your reason for applying, and verbiage. Some letter writers might even tell you, I'm happy to write a letter for you, but can you write a part of it, write a portion of it? Of course, you always want to do that if they offer that, because now you have the opportunity to present yourself exactly the way that you would like to. And so that can mean the verbiage that also is utilized in your personal statement. And that is dependent on everybody's application. Verbiage that's relevant to your fields, anything that just indicates that you're prepared, you know why you're applying, and you know what your interests are. So do not fret if someone asks you to write a portion of a letter. I always say absolutely, I'll be more than happy to do it. It's like one of the best outcomes, but it's also great when they can write you one. Okay, so week of submission can be do or die sometimes, in the sense that these deadlines when you're applying, they're hard deadlines. So you can't get that letter in 10 minutes late. So that is why sending a friendly and formal reminder via email is a great way to go. I always recommend that. So just the week of submission, just touching base with them, sending a friendly reminder that it is due, at the end of the week, saying thank you already for their consideration and their willingness. And again, include those links for easy access. Include all of the content again for easy access. You might say, oh, but I sent it in an email 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but it's just so much easier if they can access it just directly. So always, always, always do that. That could be the difference between someone submitting for you on time or not. And the reason why I emphasize this so much is because there was a year where I was applying for a fellowship, which I'm so grateful that I got. But my letter writer literally submitted like 2 minutes before the deadline. And I wouldn't have qualified for that fellowship if it were not for that letter writer, right? Because I had the minimum. I had 3 letter writers, and he submitted like 2 minutes before the deadline. I remember because I was on the website waiting for that, confirmation that all the letters had been submitted. And when I saw the professor later that day, he was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sending the links to submit, because I couldn't find it. And, I was just struggling there, but thank you for saying. So you just know that like professors are doing the best that they can. They're juggling a lot of different things. And so the easier you can make it for them to support you, the better, So I always recommend that. And thank yous never go out of style. They never go out of style. Consider sending a warm and friendly email to all of the professors who wrote for you, and just let them know, how much you appreciate it, and just thank you so much. I would even recommend updating once you are attending. Once you decide where you will be attending, just letting them know, thank you, Professor so-and-so, for writing on my behalf. I have decided to accept the offer from this university, and I'll be attending. And, because these are people who have supported you, and you never know what can come from that kind of relationship, whether it's, further collaborations as a graduate student, further networking, which is really, meeting people and connecting with people who are doing research that is similar to you is really valuable. And so you just never know where these relationships can go. And it's just never goes out of style to say thank you to the folks who have supported you. So that's all for the webinar today as far as my presentation. I do want to leave our little QR code here. So Magoosh, if you're not familiar with us, we are here to support you to get into graduate school. If you desire to be in graduate school, then you absolutely belong there. We have admissions courses. We have a friendly student community in Discord where people are sharing a lot of resources. We have instructor office hours for those, whatever it is, GRE prep, essay writing. And we even have personalized essay review. So if you're working on that personal statement and you're just, you don't really know how else to improve it, but it just needs help, we're here for you to support you in that. And so line by line feedback for those essays are also something that we offer. Let's see. Deva, my letter writers have told me to write and submit a draft of the LOR to them. Yeah. Can you give me some tips or mention things to include in my LOR since I'll be writing the draft myself? This is great, Deva. I'm happy that they did that for you. Okay, so a few tips. So ideally, you've probably already written your statement of purpose or your personal statement, or like graduate plan of study. It varies, but whatever essay you've already written where you are demonstrating your preparedness for graduate school. So you're talking about, the research you've done or the work that you've done in a specific industry, whatever it is that you are already detailing and describing. If the letter writer can in some way support or validate that, that is essentially what you want to do. So maybe you can give us more information, David. Like, let's say the letter writer is the professor that you had in undergrad and you did some research with them. If you also mention that in your statement of purpose, that's where you would want to comment on that in the letter. Now, if that's not the case, if this is just someone that you took a class with and maybe you're not really mentioning that in your statement of purpose, then you would just want to detail how it is, like that relationship that you two have. And I know it can be a little awkward sometimes because you're like, how do I describe myself from their point of view, But it's just, imagine if you were writing a letter on your behalf, but based on the relationship that you two have. So that could be in whatever capacity you two have worked together, just commenting and detailing what that was. And then anything that can indicate like your strengths as a student that they would be able to also comment on. Anything additional about your reason for applying and your preparedness to apply that you weren't able to include in the statement of purpose or personal statement. So that might be things like, like just what kind of student you are, what kind of how you show up in the classroom, how you show up in, working with other people. Those are things you don't necessarily always get to comment on in the essays, but you do get to comment on in the letters. So if you were going to write the letter yourself, I would first think about the relationship you have with this person and how that can validate and support you for graduate school. So if they were a professor you worked with closely, what about that relationship and the growth or the experiences of that relationship supports you now? And these things feel kind of vague or they feel like hard to pinpoint. And I know it feels a little awkward to talk about ourselves, but talk about yourself in the best light possible and demonstrate those things and describe those things in detail that you would like for this letter writer to be able to say, and I think also when you are able to write the letter yourself, you're able to connect to that experience and how it connects to graduate school now on your own, which letter writers aren't always able to do if they don't know you best, because they don't necessarily know why you're applying or how this prepared you. They can guess or estimate, but you truly know. So just know that you're in a great position to be able to write for yourself, and it might feel a little awkward, but when you give it to them, they will be able to edit out anything that doesn't resonate or, kind of adjust the verbiage because they've written other letters before. So just kind of start with like a foundation that you would like for them to build on. So some things to include are the experiences you have had with them, how that prepares you for graduate school, details about the mentorship that they have provided and how that has impacted you. But of course, you're writing from their perspective, right? So instead of you saying, and it has impacted me in this way, they would probably say, the mentorship I have provided has, I have seen her growth in her writing, in her critical thinking, in her, in her interest in the research at large, making her a prepared student, or I'm sorry, I guessed your gender, Dave. I don't know. Making them a prepared student, making them, an exceptional candidate. So those are sometimes some of the verbiage you want to think about. Exceptional candidate, likelihood of contributions to said program, things like that. So just see it as like a very a powerful place to be in, and something that allows you to kind of take it into your own hands, That was a great question, though, David. If you have any follow-up on that, feel free to drop it in the chat. Of course, you're so welcome. Any other questions are absolutely welcome. They don't need to be related to letters of rec at all. I was going to say they don't need to be related to graduate school, but they do, just not letters of rec. How long should the LOR be? Yeah. These super vary. If you can get it to 2 pages, that would be phenomenal. If you can get it to 3 pages, that's fine too. Usually they don't get to 3 pages unless, you really have that kind of relationship with the professor and there's a lot that they can say, but at least 2 pages, because that's a strong letter. It has a good amount of content and is providing like in-depth context for the review committee. If you feel that you can only get it to 1 page, but you do, you've said everything that you can say, that's fine. That's okay. Just the fact that it's a page doesn't mean it's not going to be a strong letter or go a long way for you. But I would say 2 pages if you can. Yeah. When I write for students, I pretty much will agree to write if I can get it to 2 pages because that's a strong letter. And I don't necessarily want to write a letter for someone that just kind of isn't really very strong and kind of just taking up space in the possible pool of other folks that could write for them. So 2 pages if you can get it there. Oh, and since you are writing the draft for them, Deva, it's likely that they are going to add other things or remove things. So if you can't get it to 2 pages, that's okay. You can provide them a foundation and most likely they'll be able to add a little bit more for you. So just know that when you are writing the letter for someone else, it's just like a starting point and they will be able to change it and add more information to you. Oops. Okay, so I'm a recent CS graduate from India. I just joined Cape Gemini as a software engineer. I'm still a fresher. Should I get some work experience before coming to master's or should I apply right away? Yeah, this is a personal question. It's really dependent on if you think you can benefit from that work experience. If you think that you want more time to decide what you would like your master's in, if you want to apply to a very competitive master's, perhaps if that master's accepts letters of rec from employers, then you might want to stay in the workforce a little bit longer, so that you can get those letters. So it depends on your strategy. If you already know where you want to go and you think you're a strong candidate based on your experiences right now, like you have strong letters of recommendation from your degree program, you are able to take that exam and do well if it requires an exam, and you know where you want to go and why, like you're set on that, then I would say go ahead and apply. But if you are in any way kind of hesitant, you want the opportunity to get strong letters from your employers, then that would be a reason to stay a little longer to get those letters. Even if it's just a year, even if it's 2 years, a year working and then a year where you are applying, sending out those applications to different programs. Yeah, it absolutely depends on your strategy, what it is you want. If you aren't certain on what master's you want and you would just kind of like to work a little longer, then I would recommend to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Just because applying to a master's is a lot of work, and it's worth it when you know where you're going and why. And if you do know that and you qualify, you meet the requirements to apply, then I would say absolutely go ahead and apply. You don't always need a bunch of work experience to demonstrate that you're prepared. But if you think for the masters that you're applying to, then more work experience would help you stand out as an applicant, and it's competitive without that work experience, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with waiting a little while longer. It's not. Sometimes I think we create this idealized timeline, I know I do, of what should come next. I should have like my degree by this age and publications by this age and all of these things, and that would be ideal. But if something if an alternative is better for you and you know that it's going to be a better strategy for you and it's going to pay off in the long run, then I recommend doing that. And if staying and getting some work experience is going to pay off for you in the long run, it's going to confirm why you're in this field. It's going to provide the recommendations you need. It's going to help you stand out. All of that, then stay right there and make sure you get that. You know what I mean? Awesome. Yeah, of course. You're welcome. I wish you the best with that. Yeah, it's all about your personal strategy, really. I mean, you know what you want and you know what it takes to get it. So just, look for that in whatever way that you can. What should be included indicators in letter of recommendations from employers from graduate application? Oh, yes. Cool. So if your application is accepting letters from recent employers, a lot of that is going to be about what it's like to work with you, like how you show up. Because you're not taking courses, you're not studying, you are showing up in a real work environment, and you are responsible to carry out tasks or lead projects, whatever that is. So anything that can detail what it's like to work with you and what you bring is going to be a valuable content. So that indicates your preparedness for the program, because all of those skills that you gain in the work experience are going to transfer. They don't just go away. They transfer to you as a student, because you still need discipline as a student. You still need time management. You still need a problem solving perspective and attitude. You still need to be flexible. All of those things that you utilize in your work experience, you still need as a graduate student. So if you can demonstrate that you have developed skills there and that they are applicable to graduate school, that's a strong letter. Anything else that demonstrates, presents yourself in a way that you're not able to do in those essays, is also strong. So if you're writing, a personal statement, you're writing it from your perspective, you're not always able to comment on what your superior or your employer might be able to say about you. So that's the opportunity that you have in that letter of recommendation. So I don't know, Riyadh, if you have been asked to write that letter. If you have, then you can start to develop that verbiage on your own. And so that when you submit that draft to the actual letter writer, it's pretty much done for them, and they already know like that all they're doing is proofreading and editing a little bit and adding a little bit of their own, but they already know that they're ready to go. And if you're not writing the letter, but you're requesting the letter of recommendation, it is fine to ask that letter writer, hey, is it possible, is it okay for me to provide some details about what would be ideal for the letter to discuss? And if the letter writer says yes, then you could say, it would be great if you could comment on, my contributions to this project. Or it would be great if you could comment on the success of this project that we have been, you know what I mean? So let them know, indicate to them what you would like to be in the letter. If they are, if they already confirm that they're open to receiving that feedback from you. Does that make sense? So it depends. If you're writing a letter for yourself, you're developing that verbiage and you are picking what it is that you would like for that employer to comment on. If you're not writing the letter, then you're just providing some of that kind of like examples, ideas, possible verbiage for them, kind of as just like, here is a resource if you will consider using that. Oh, one of my professors surprisingly told me he wouldn't be able to write letters for my PhD applications for political science, citing that he would be too busy and wouldn't be able to focus on writing. Can I request a letter from another professor with whom I worked for 4 months in a research project on political science? So first, I am sorry that that person is not able to write for you. That's a bummer, especially if you feel like that would have been a strong letter, especially if you had that longer relationship with that person and it just really would have gone a long way. It's a bummer. It really is. And it's kind of like a unfortunate downside of applications is that sometimes they can't write for you. Sometimes it's just not the season. They're too busy. They have way too much on their plate and they don't want to risk not submitting on time. So first of all, I'm sorry about that. But secondly, if you worked with a professor for 4 months in a research project, that's a great resource. Yeah, so I would just reach out to them similarly as you reached out to the other professor and just let them know and ask if they'd be able to write a strong letter and be able to submit by the date. 4 months in a research project is great. That's ideal. It's not expected that you've known all of these professors for years and that they've seen you since you were in kindergarten and they can comment on it's not, it doesn't need to be that at all. Just someone who can say, I've worked with this student. We have had this kind of relationship and, they're prepared. I think they would make a great candidate. Just that is enough. So I am sorry about the other professor who wasn't able to write for you, but a 4-month research project is perfect. Especially if that research is in any way connected to what you're pursuing in graduate school now. Oh, you're welcome, Riyad. I'm glad that was helpful. Oh, you're welcome, Erasmus. I don't know if that's your real name, but that's a beautiful name. You're very welcome. Yeah. And I've had professors tell me that before too. Like, you know what? I just can't do it. I just don't have the capacity right now. You know, the thing about professors too is that they take on different like workloads per quarter, you know, so sometimes they might be teaching extra classes, or they have a new appointment with another department, or they're, you know, now they're the lead investigator for this. It's like it changes all the time. And so it honestly, it might hurt a little because you're like, oh, that would have been a good letter, but it would be more of a letdown if you expected a letter from them, you needed them to qualify, and then they didn't submit. That would be more of a letdown than for them to let you know, I can't do it. I just won't be able to. And that way you can look for other people, other potential letter writers. Yeah. And again, these questions do not need to be about letters of rec. Anything graduate school related, I'm happy to answer for y'all. You all. And a little bit about my experiences. I am in the 4th year of my program, which, FYI, it does fly by. I can't even believe it. 4 years out of 7. So I still have, like, you know, a little bit of ways to go, but definitely feeling like I can slowly start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm at the University of California at Santa Barbara. So that's one of the UCs, in the UC system out here in California. And I think that letters of recommendation are kind of just this interesting aspect of not just graduate school, but like academia. I recently wrote a letter. It's not really a letter of recommendation. It was a student evaluation for a professor that I've had the pleasure to work with over, I don't know, 5 or 7 years. I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And he, you know, he was going up for a really like prestigious, wonderful. It's not really like, not. It's like a new position. You know what I mean? As a professor, like a new like tier of professorship. And so I was able to write a letter for him as a student who has worked with him. And that was so great to do. Like, that was the first time where I felt like, oh my God, it's so nice to write for someone that you really genuinely care about and want the best for them, and you want to see them in that position, and you truly believe that they are the best candidate for that. So it was just so great. I wish I had more time to write it, but easily 2 pages. And there's just so much I wanted to say, and it's great. So if you have those professors who, like, you know, work with you, and even those that like you weren't that close with, but you know, you guys both have a love for whatever it is that you study, you know, you guys both, then, you know, you'd be surprised by how many people are like, yeah, absolutely. Because why? Because the fact that they are in the position that they are means that plenty of people wrote letters for them, and we know that and understand that. So it's kind of just like something that you do, but you know, you also have received, and so it's just this, like, we all circulate that letter of rec experience. Oh, Asit said, I just want to give a try for PhD at UC Berkeley. Yes, I wonder in what you would like your PhD in. Berkeley is a phenomenal school. I mean, I love Berkeley. I grew up in Oakland, so Berkeley was like, you know, 15 minutes away. And the campus just has this energy. It's just this, like, I love it. I absolutely love it. But it was too close to home for me to go. So microbiology, super cool. Wow, that'd be amazing. Microbio, very, very cool. So I'm assuming if you wanted, you might know some labs that you would be interested in working in. Is that the way it works for the PhD in microbio? Sometimes it does. You contact the yes. Can you give tips? What I should ask my professor for LOR? Yeah. Do you mean like how? Do you mean like how to ask? Yes, labs. Okay. So you already know like which lab you'd like to go into. Like sometimes in programs, PhDs, because they're a lot longer, sometimes you don't get into the lab until, you know, 2 or 3 years into your program, and then you decide on the lab. Other times you decide on which lab you want to be in and you contact that lab director before you even apply to see if there's availability, if there's space for you, if your research interests align. So just know that it's different sometimes, and you need to figure that out within the department. So first off, to even be considered to be accepted. And then secondly, yes, I am at a UC. Secondly, for letters of recommendation to ask. So I did cover that in the webinar. Let's go to one of the slides. Sorry. Okay, so you first want to reach out to these potential letter writers and gauge their interest, gauge their availability to write for you. So that is that first initial contact. If you can do it in person, that would be great. A handshake and a smile goes a long way. But if you can't, it would be an email where you would be asking if they would consider and have the availability to write for you. Now, if you're contacting professors that you haven't seen in a while, you would want to refresh their memory of who you are. So that might mean including the course that you took with them, the grade that you received, the subject, the date that you took that course, because they teach it, every year usually, and what you learned or what you gained from that class, what you're still interested in from that class, and how that contributes to your interest to apply. So for Asit's question is like, can you give me some tips? That's the strategy behind it, is that you want to make a compelling, you want to, like, that first ask for the letter, you kind of want it to be a compelling ask in the sense that in some way the class you took with them has impacted your interest to apply now. Them as a professor, as a scholar, is part of the reason why you want to go to graduate school. So you see how you can kind of create like a compelling, and it's just being honest. If this is how you feel, let them know that, right? And that gives them kind of more of a connection to you as a student and a willingness to write for you. When you are requesting that letter of recommendation, Asit, you want to have resources handy. So that would be the CV that you're applying with, or the statement of purpose. So that if they say, oh yes, I'd be happy to write for you, do you have any materials for me to look at? You already have it for them. Don't wait a week or 2 or 3, because by then the window might have closed. They might, it might be different. So submit that CV or statement of purpose after they say yes. When they say, yes, I'm interested, yes, I can write for you, then go ahead and follow up and say, here are some materials for your reference. And that is always going to make the chances of you getting a strong letter higher, because they have something to reference now. That's when what is that? That's more material for the letter. So that might be, the date of an internship that you have. They can comment on it because they helped you get that internship or whatever it is. That's just an example, right? So you want to have those resources handy. Make it easy for them. Once they say, yes, I'm happy to write for you, you submit that those resources. Also provide the link to submit, the dates very clearly stated. Your reason for applying, just once more, remember, I'm a student who's applying for microbiome and UC Berkeley is my top choice because of the whatever that is. I'm also applying to UC Irvine and Stanford and UCLA, right? So just because you're going to need a letter for each application. So you want to make it as transparent and as clear as possible in those emails. If they're open to verbiage, like if they said, hey, is there anything you would like me to focus on? Or if you have any recommendations or then that is when you will provide that verbiage. So that might be things like, specifics about your research interests, or specifics about, the relationship that you two have and like the mentorship that it provided and how it has prepared you. So you're going to get a little crafty and creative as far as providing the resources that they need, because let's be honest, everybody wants a strong letter of recommendation, right? The people who write for you want to write you a strong letter of recommendation, but only you know where you're applying, why, and you know the inside, because you've hopefully done your research of what it takes to get in. And you want to do your very, very best to present yourself in that way, because the review committee doesn't know you. They don't get to meet you. You don't get to walk in the room, a seat, and sit down with them and say, this is who I am and this is why I'm prepared for this program. All they get is what shows up on paper. So you want to take this opportunity to take advantage of that as much as you can. And that means making it as easy as possible for your letter writer to write on your behalf. That's my recommendation. I'm sure other folks have different tips, but that's the way I go about it. I make it as easy as possible for them. So I hope that was helpful. Asit, if you have further questions, do not hesitate to drop it in the chat. I wanted to ask how applications for PhD programs are examined by professors, because most of the time, many applicants have good letters from the professors, and I would be applied from Europe. Oh, do professors give more priority for recommendation letters, which are from the US universities, or all letters examined equally? Okay, this is a great question. And sorry, I'm just looking in the chat. This is a great question, and it varies. So some universities are looking for more international students for different reasons. They want to have a bigger international student population. They are looking for certain types of funding that comes in with international students because they usually pay higher tuition. That's a reality. Other universities want to make sure to prioritize students in the surrounding community. So I know that the UC system, for example, just made that announcement that they are, particularly with certain institutions, certain universities, they are making a priority to accept students who are from the local community. So that is to say, your question is that it's dependent on the university. It's not a universal rule that universities prefer international students or don't. It's not universal in any way. It's all dependent on the internal dynamics of that university. Now, I wouldn't say that because you're from Europe, you don't qualify. There are so many international students, and it's just kind of important for you to kind of do a little research about the institution. And like, I'm pretty sure that you can find data on how many international students they accept. But it's not to say that professors from Europe, when they write you a letter, it's not as, valuable as letters from the US. That's not the case at all. We know that institutions globally have something to contribute, and that there are great scholars and minds all over the world. And so as long as the letters in the language, like English, ideally in the US, usually they don't accept other languages, unfortunately, but as long as it's readable and accessible, it's fine. So I would say that they are examined equally. Obviously, and unfortunately for some of us, if you do get a letter from a professor who's well known in the United States, that does have an impact, right? Like that is the truth, is that sometimes if you get a letter from someone who's really well known, it goes a long way. But the reality is not everybody gets that. So that's okay. You're not at a disadvantage because you're applying from Europe or because European professors are writing for you. I would say you're not. Now, as far as like, if you will be accepted within the program, that's dependent on, the demographic of the pool of applicants for that year, how many international students they accept, how many have applied, and so forth, right? And so that's something that you can research based on each university. November. Okay, if the end of November is your deadline, you definitely want to send out those emails pronto. Okay, this is a good question. Should we send GRE for securing scholarship for those who state it as optional? even if the score is not that great. So the strategy with the GRE when it's optional is one, they're going to look at it even though it's optional. So you really only want to submit it if it's going to strengthen your application. If it's not going to strengthen your application because you said the score is not great, then I wouldn't submit it. That's my personal strategy. That's my personal recommendation. If you could, and then not that great is also kind of a question too. Do you know what the average score has been for recent applicants? Are you anywhere near there? If you are very close to it, or maybe you are above it and you just don't know what the average has been. Figure out what the average has been of accepted applicants and see where you measure up. If you're significantly below that, then I wouldn't submit it. I would not, because they are going to look at it and it could hinder your application. Okay. Does the qualification of letter writer matter? For example, is an LOR from a professor who has PhD better than an LOR from a professor who has master's? Or does it all depend on content of the letter, or maybe both? Yes, actually, it does depend on a lot of different things. Yeah, that's a complicated one. I'd say for universities, like for graduate school, it usually they'll indicate, like, if it's just like former professors and it doesn't indicate that they need to have a PhD, then you're good to go, because that's not the indication of the requirement. Now, if you're hesitant about that based on the program that you're applying to, I would contact them and just let them know, one or a few of my letter writers have masters. They are professors at this university institution. We have, is that going to hinder my application? And they should be able to provide an answer for you. Typically, like rule of thumb, PhD is like the ideal letter that you want. That's why, like graduate students, like we can't really write letters for graduate school applications for students, because it's like, we're students too. So, but if the program only indicates that it needs to be a professor, if they're professors, then that's fine, because, programs differ. And I have actually someone on my committee, my graduate committee, who has a master's in fine arts. She has an MFA. So she doesn't have a PhD, but she writes for me for fellowships and scholarships, and it's been fine. I've gotten some of them, and yeah. So because the fellowship indicates professors that you have, and it is known that like the higher ranking that they are, the more impactful the letter. But it doesn't mean that someone with a master's cannot write for you. Ideally, you would also have other letter writers. And so it's just like one amongst a few. But I would definitely recommend contacting the department and just asking them. Just, for peace of mind, just reach out and ask. You're very welcome, Astrid, and you are very welcome, Erasmus. You're very welcome, Riyadh. All right. This was fun. This was good. I feel like there's so much to say about this, and it's like really such a strategy, but it's not as daunting or as scary as it seems, as it sounds. Yes, good vibes. Good vibes. I'm going to go back to our QR code. So if you, there we go. If you would like to scan to see our resources, please do. See what Magoosh has to offer for you, support you in graduate school. Okay, maybe you can provide a little more context for your question. For personal statement or letter, Should we include specific field of study to study for MSc? Okay, definitely. For the personal statement, you want to include the specific field of study. Absolutely. I'd say for all personal statements for graduate school, you do want to get specific about the field of study. You don't want to write a generic letter that you send to a bunch of different programs, because that program wants to know why they're your top choice. They want to know why this program, and the only way that you can indicate that is by getting specific about it. So I like when I'm providing feedback for students for Magoosh for their essays, a lot of them are strong and I can tell it's the general essay, and that's fine because you usually need to write the general essay and then write the other ones. But I always recommend to students, make sure that you create a version of that general essay that speaks to the specifics of why this program, because the review committee wants to know that you've done your research and you know why you're applying. So I would say absolutely. And then for the letter, excuse me. So for the letter, that would basically mean that everyone who's writing for you would include some specifics. And usually, because that letter writer, when it comes to graduate school, is going to submit 2, 3, 4, who knows how many letters, they're not going to make it very specific. It's going to be a general letter about you as a student and why you're prepared for graduate school. So that's fine. And I think that's expected, especially if you're applying to many programs. Some people apply to many, many programs, like 10 programs. If you're applying to 2 or 3, perhaps you can ask that letter writer kind of tailor each letter. And that's not too much work. It might be the difference of like 3 to 4 sentences in which they kind of explain anything that's relevant to that field or to that program. But if it's a general letter that they send out to every program, as long as it doesn't, say University of Massachusetts when the application is like UCLA, as long as it doesn't mix up any of those terms, you're fine. Sending a general letter is fine from professors. Something, as long as it details why you're prepared and their recommendations. Your personal statement should always be tailored to the specifics of the program. Always. That's the difference between an okay personal statement and a really stellar standout one. I hope that answers your question. I am on LinkedIn. If you'd like to stay connected, I can drop my LinkedIn in just 1 second. Okay, I prepared, excuse me, a journal article and submitted it to Scientific Academic Journal in the US, but I still wait the response. It's still under review. Should I mention it? Yes. I would absolutely mention it. Even if it's not accepted, that's okay. You still have the manuscript and you would probably make edits to it, make changes, and resubmit either to that journal or another, right? And so I say that to say that like you still have a valuable manuscript there, and that's important, and that demonstrates your research experience. So I would definitely mention it in the statement of purpose. And you can just, exactly as you described it, that you have submitted a journal article, detail the content, the topic, the journal that you submitted it to, what the research is, and that it's in review, that it's under review. And it should be on your CV too. Actually, maybe it wouldn't be on your CV because it's under review. But just mention that you have submitted it, that you have the manuscript and such. That would be great. If those professors worked with you in any capacity, and they can comment on the research, absolutely. If they're not necessarily connected to that and they can't really speak on it, then I think that you would be the best person to write about it. Does that make sense? So if they can comment on it, because I don't know how to share my LinkedIn. I'm looking for how to do that. If they can comment on the article or the journal article, if they can comment on the research that you've done, perhaps they know about it, things like that, then they should. But if not, you would be the best person to do that. I don't know how to share my LinkedIn. Someone just asked. Do I just send the link of the feed? I don't know. It seems a little silly. Oh, invitations? Maybe you know how to do that? Oh, LinkedIn name. Okay, just LinkedIn name. Duh. Okay. My LinkedIn name is Veronica Manducano. Now I'll type that here. Yeah, so that's me on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's me on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect, I'd be happy to. I'm also obviously here with Magoosh. If you have more questions, if you are in our subscriber channel, if you have any of our subscriptions, you can send those questions in Discord, and I do weekly videos answering all of these questions in depth. So there's that. Absolutely. This is great, Dava. My professors are going to publish my work as a paper or small article. Can I mention this? Absolutely. Ask them to mention that, or, just they probably already know to do that if they're writing for you. But ideally they will be able to mention it. You can, remind them. It would be great if you could comment on that. I think that would be great for the letter if they're open to that. And if not, you should also you should mention it in your personal statement. If you haven't already. Okay, great, everyone. That concludes our time for today. Thank you all. Your questions have been wonderful. I love seeing you all every week. Again, my name is Veronica. Here is our QR code to scan and check out what Magoosh has to offer for you. Until next time. Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your day or evening or morning.